We're joined in the studio now by Portsmouth author Derek Nudd, whose latest release, Castaways of the Kriegsmarine, is set in the closing days of 1943. Following a career in the engineering industry, Derek speaks to us about his second book ahead of a signing on Saturday the 27th. Derek, thank you very much for joining us. How
My
are
pleasure.
you?
Well, thanks.
Tell us about this book. Where do we even start?
Well, the trigger came when I read one of Helen Fry's books about the interrogation of German prisoners of war. She and a German author or German researcher, Sönke Neitzel, stumbled more or less simultaneously on a mass release of interrogation records, or rather eavesdropping records, in which German prisoners were overheard in their cells chatting about secret matters. And all this stuff hit the National Archives in the first few years of this century. And she and Sönke produced books coming at it from different angles. I read Helen's book, which was focused on the secret listeners, the mostly German Jewish refugees who had to listen and transcribe this material. And I found in the appendix on the staff list the name of my grandfather. So I started digging, and very quickly the story acquired a momentum of its own, which eventually led to this.
I'm sure your grandfather's involvement made it all the more interesting for you.
Absolutely, but the ripples just kept spreading. It's been a really fascinating exercise.
What's it like now to be able to share this research with everyone?
I love it. I really do, because particularly from the naval point of view, but obviously being living in Portsmouth, being a volunteer with the National Museum of the Royal Navy, and having worked in the naval supply industry, one of the things that's come out is just how critical the Naval Intelligence Service was in both wars, but I've been looking at the Second World War and how much they contributed to the war effort. So I focused on the Naval Intelligence section of what was called the Combined Services Combined Services Detailed Interrogation Centres, and looked at the ordinary seagoing officers and matelots rather than the movers and shakers, so focusing down to make it a manageable scope for this book, and brought out some really interesting stuff.
How's it all been received so far? Has anyone read it yet?
Yes, plenty of people have read it, and it has been very well received. And I think there's a lot of new material come out here. I think other people are finding it almost as interesting to read as I found it to write.
And of course, that must be the dream as a writer.
Yeah.
And how did you start writing? Because I take it you were more in the engineering, as you mentioned, industry beforehand. When did it click that you thought, actually, I'm going to get pen to paper?
Well, in a way, this is returning to my roots, because my first degree was in history and English. I then did a master's in operational research and systems analysis. So that gave me the analytical tools to tackle this. And then my subsequent career gave me the domain knowledge. So, having retired and having a bit of time on my hands, this was just the joy of being able to do something like this.
And tell me a bit about your volunteering work. How has that related with this?
I started off doing some background research on the M33 project, the monitor that's sitting there now, and then switched to doing work on the Jutland interactive map. So not directly relevant, but again, very interesting work. And in fact, we will be doing the signing in the Jutland bookshop, so that is a straight read across there.
Yes, and Helen will be there as well, won't she?
Yeah, and yes, we'll be doing a joint signing. My book looks at the production line intelligence work of the CISDIC Combined Services Detailed Interrogation Centres. She will be looking at her book looks at the darker side, a London cage, where the most recalcitrant prisoners were taken to undergo, I think, what were called special intelligence methods, which is a bit of a euphemism.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you.
My pleasure entirely.